Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Perfection of pure devotional service is attained when all attention is diverted towards the transcendental loving service of the Lord. To cut off the tie of all other affections does not mean complete negation of the finer elements like affection for someone else. This is not possible. A living being, whoever he may be, must have this feeling of affection for others because this is a symptom of life. The symptoms of life, such as desire and anger and hankerings and feelings of attraction and so on, cannot be annihilated. Only the objective has to be changed. Desire cannot be negated, but in devotional service, the desire is changed only for the service of the Lord in place of desire for sense gratification. The so-called affection for society and family and country and so on consists of different phases of sense gratification. When this desire is changed for the satisfaction of the Lord, it is called devotional service. In the Bhagavad Gita, we can see that Arjuna desired not to fight with his brothers and relations just to satisfy his own personal desires. But when he heard the message of the Lord, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, he changed his decision and served the Lord. And for his doing so, he became a famous devotee of the Lord. For it is declared in all the scriptures that Arjuna attained spiritual perfection by devotional service to the Lord and friendship. The fighting was there, but also friendship was there. Arjuna was there, and Krishna was there. But Arjuna became a different person by devotional service. Therefore, the prayers of Kunti also indicate the same categorical changes and activities. Srimati Kunti wanted to serve the Lord without diversion, and that was her prayer. This unalloyed devotion is the ultimate goal of life. Our attention is usually diverted in the service of something which is ungodly and not in the program of the Lord. When the program is changed into the service of the Lord, that is to say, when the senses are purified in relation to the service of the Lord, it is called pure unalloyed devotional service. Srimati Kunti Devi wanted that perfection and prayed for it from the Lord. Her affection for the Pandavas and the Vrishnis is not out of the range of devotional service because the service of the Lord and the service of the devotees are identical. Sometimes service to the devotee is more valuable than service to the Lord. But here the affection of Kunti Devi for the Pandavas and Vrishnis was due to family relation. This tie of affection in terms of material relation is the relation of Maya because the relations of the body or the mind are due to the influence of the external energy. Relations of the soul established in relation with the Supreme Soul are factual relations. When Kunti Devi wanted to cut off the family relationship, she meant to cut off the relationship of the skin. The skin relation is the cause of material bondage, but the relation of the soul is the cause of freedom. This relation of the soul to the soul can be established by the via medium of relationship with the Supreme Soul. Seeing in the darkness is not seeing, but seeing by the light of the sun means to see the sun and to see everything else which was unseen in the darkness. That is the way of devotional service. Gyan Manandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshramanitam Jena Tasma Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Vijale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vicharane Nirvasi Shasmi Vadipasthitadi Vidhamane Jaya Shri Krishna
Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Rama Hare Hare
Nanda Vilamaya Vigrahaya Himadura Charishamudaya Tasmai Mahaprema Rasakudaya Chaitanya Chandaya Namo Namaste. About a year and a half ago, I was flying from, I think I was flying back from Mayapur to Delhi. And on all of the national carriers, when you fly, they always have the daily news, the midday news, the morning news, this news, that news. So I took the Indian newspaper and I started looking through it. And then I saw that there was going to be that evening in Delhi, there was going to be a classical music and dance performance at the Indian Institute of Technology. It's a very prestigious school, the most prestigious school in India. And it was free. And my disciple Vrindavan Bihari was meeting me in Delhi. And I had a lady disciple in Delhi from Kazakhstan. And she was studying Kathak dance in Delhi. And the master who was going to be performing that evening in this program, he was the master of all the masters of Kathak dance in India. His name is Maharaja. So as soon as the plane landed, I took my phone and I phoned this lady disciple, Banu Nandini. And I said, Banu, I said, Vrindavan Bihari and I are going to pick you up and we're going to go to this program together. And she said, very good. So we went there, and there were two artists. The first artist was a classical music artist. His name is Shiv Kumar Sharma. And he plays an instrument called a santur, which is this thing that has metal strings on it, and he hits it with little copper hammers, and it's a very beautiful thing. And when we walked into the auditorium was packed. And what they were doing is they were just taking people and they were telling them to go sit on the stage next to the performer. So one of the students from the university said, Swamiji, please, you just go sit next to Shiv Kumar Sharma. So I went and I sat there. It was very, very nice, very relaxed and sort of intimate type atmosphere. And Shiv Kumar Sharma came, and he's a real master of his instrument. And he greeted the audience, and he said it was very nice that IIT was holding these cultural festivals so that the young people would come and participate and they would remain connected to India's culture. Because India is India is basically they've lost the script. India is quite lost now. Even in the pages of the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada wrote way back 40 years ago, 45 years ago, the culture of India is lost. What to speak of now? So Shiv Kumar was giving his introduction, and one child started crying in the back of the audience. And Shiv Kumar Sharma, in a very gentlemanly way, he said, there is one maestro in the audience tonight. And he said, I would humbly like to request that if the maestro starts to perform while I am performing, that his manager could please take him out from the auditorium, because I'm very much afraid that his raga will conflict with my raga. And then another time, it was a great performance. Ooh, and something great. And then Birju Maharaj performed. Birju Maharaj is a Bengali man, about 70 years old, and he does Kathak dance. Oh, it was like he was doing these things, you know, and he would end one movement, and everybody in the audience would go, because through his artistic expression of culture, he was like just pulling emotion out of people, and you'd hear the whole audience go, you know. That's why Srila Prabhupada said that we can conquer, our movement will be he called it a cultural conquest. We should conquer the world through the culture of Krishna consciousness. Meaning, naturally, philosophy is an aspect of culture, and ritual is an aspect of culture, and our cuisine is an aspect of culture, and our dance is an aspect of culture, and our dress is an aspect of culture, and the drama is an aspect of culture, and so many wonderful cultural aspects by which we can bring people to Krishna consciousness. The Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vedesha sarvair aham eva vedya. He says there is the Veda, and there is the Vedic culture, and he says, aham, I am the ultimate goal of the Vedic culture. So, like, through so many different types of presentation, people can become attracted to Krishna. Then one time Srila Prabhupada was giving a class, I heard this lecture, and I think maybe it was a press conference, I'm not sure, or no, maybe a class. And one child started to cry, and Srila Prabhupada said, could you please remove the child? And then there was somebody there in the audience that just immediately attacked Prabhupada. And they said, if you are a realized soul, why are you disturbed by a child? And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, I'm not disturbed, but your brain will certainly become disturbed. And you won't be able to concentrate on what I'm saying. This is needless to say, this is a very beautiful verse. And it's, the verse is, it is very succinct, but it makes a very strong impression. And then Prabhupada's purport is like beautifully, so beautifully written poetry, you know, or prose, describing the emotions and the feelings of pure devotional service. And Kunti Devi, she takes an example that we can relate to. She gives the example of the powerful Ganga. And she says that in the same way that the powerful Ganga flows without any obstruction to the sea, let my devotion to you flow in the same way without any hindrance. He says nothing can stop the flow of the Ganga. Similarly, let my devotion to you be unobstructed. And to the best of my recollection, there's a similar verse in the Kapila Dev section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Kapila, he says that he defines pure devotion in a similar way. He says that like the mighty Ganga flowing to the sea, when my spirit of loving devotion will flow to your lotus feet, that will be known as pure devotion. So Prabhupada begins his purport from the perspective that perfection of pure devotion means that all of the feelings of life become directed to Krishna. He says that it's pure devotion to the Lord, or perfection of pure devotional service, does not mean to cancel or to try to negate the finer feelings of life. Feelings of love, feelings of friendship, feelings of so many different feelings. Prabhupada even says feelings like desire, and anger, and different hankerings. Pure devotion doesn't mean to simply cancel these things or to negate these things, but he says it means to direct towards the Lord. And he says that, he makes the essential point that desire is something which is eternal, and desire is a function of the eternal spiritual soul. We know that the first point, like the first philosophical concept that the Lord presents to Arjuna in his discussion of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Arjuna, he says, try to understand one thing, and this is the beginning of the Lord's entire argument, because he presents a very, the Bhagavad Gita is an argument, it's a philosophical argument from the beginning to the end. It's a philosophical argument that evolves, and it's a very tight-knit argument. It's a very clear argument, which concludes in surrender to me. Everything else should be given up. You should surrender to me. So the first point that he makes is, Arjuna, you should understand one thing. Never was there a time when I did not exist. No, never was there a time when any of these kings on the battlefield did not exist. There was never a time when you didn't exist. And there will never come a time in the future where any of us will cease to exist. two things. One thing, just the first argument, establishing the eternal aspect of the soul. And then second thing, through establishing the eternality of the soul, presenting the concept that even if we do attain perfection, the soul will not be annihilated, or the soul will not lose its eternal nature into something else. It's not that we will lose our identity into the Brahman, or that we will enter into the void, or some concept like that. But the soul is eternal, and the functions of the soul, such as desire and hankering, these are eternal as well. So then basically the argument evolves with, from the platform. Prabhupada says that the foundation is understanding how we're not the body and how we are the soul. And then how to satisfy the soul. And then clearly understanding what the effects are when we simply try to satisfy desire and hankering in relationship to the material body. And that we have heard classes, unlimited classes. But what happens when we try to satisfy desires pertaining to material sense gratification? There's an example which is given in the Bhagavatam, which it explains the dangerous position of trying to fulfill material hankerings or aspirations. It explains that trying to fulfill one's desires for success within the material world is like being in a jungle. And behind you, you have a tiger. And in front of you, you have a lion. And tiger is chasing from one side, meaning the fulfillment of the desires. Performing the activity to try to find the momentary happiness of the material body. Or maybe if you become a bit more evolved, trying to satisfy your community, or trying to satisfy your nation. But what happens? The tiger is chasing, and it's chasing you into the face of the lion. And what is that? That is being bound by the reaction that comes from engaging in material activities. And then Mritu Sansara Bharmani, again and again, taking birth in this material world. Krishna says, Shradadana Purusha Dharmasya Parantapa Aprapyamam Nivartante Mritu Sansara Bharmani. He says, for those people who do not have the required Shraddha, a man, Ashradadana Purusha, Dharmasya Parantapa, he does not follow the path of Dharma. Aprapyamam. Who can tell me what prapya means? Any idea? To attain. Like we read about that prapti city that yogis want, that they can take things. He says, aprapyamam, you will not attain me. Nivartante, you will fall down. And what will you fall down into? Mrityu Sansara Bharmani. You will fall down into the ocean of samsara, which is characterized by the repetition of birth and death. So, on one side, trying to fulfill the desires and aspirations of the material situation for material sense gratification. This is all that we have to look forward to. Or as Srila Sanatana Goswami instructed in the drama the other day, Yehi samspara saja bhoga dupayona evati jantavanta konteya nateshu ramate buddha. What did you say?
An intelligent person does not take pleasure in the sources of misery which arise from contact with senses. Such persons have everything in mind, and therefore the wise person does not delight in them.
Nateshu ramate buddha. Person who has buddhi, person who has good intelligence, he does not get ramanti, he does not get joy from engaging in sense objects, because he knows it's just a source of misery. Or Srila Prabhupada would say, he would say the pleasure of sense gratification is simply this. He would say material pleasure is the seed of material distress. So sometimes people, Prabhupada is saying here, they have the idea that advancement or perfection means to negate. But instead of negation, Krishna consciousness presents the positive perspective. And Srila Prabhupada alludes to one verse, Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparatena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti uchate. He says, what is uttama bhakti? What is the perfection of bhakti? And how to define that? He says, uttama bhakti is defined by sarva upadi vinirmuktam, that all material conceptions, all your material ideas, they become eliminated. Tatparatena nirmalam. And then you become nirmal. You know, nirmal means what? Spotless, right? Tatparatena nirmalam. And your heart becomes spotless and pure. And then he says, how to attain that? Rishikena rishikesha sevanam. That we take our senses and we always keep them in connection to the master of the senses, Sri Krishna. We take our spirit of love. To love is not a bad thing, but we should love the right thing. We take our spirit of love and we apply that spirit of love in relationship to Krishna. To have desire for the Lord is not a bad thing. It's like we were saying the other day, Nartam Dastakur's desire. Gauramna Bolite Habipula Prasharya. Or Nartam Dastakur has also said, Radha Krishna Pran Mor Jugala Kishore Jivani Marani Gati Arunahi Mor. He is saying the service of Radha and Krishna, that is my life. He says, in a living condition or a dead condition, I have no other desire. And then he goes on, Nartam Dastakur, he continues, and he says, when will that cherished day come when I will actually take the divine couple and I will make them sit down on a jeweled throne and a grove of kadamba trees on the banks of the Jamuna, and I'll spin a chamara in front of them. He says, I will give them chamara, I will put flower garlands on their neck, I will put chewing spices inside of their mouth, and they will simply give me mercy. Or Nartam Dastakur, in the end of his Prarthana, two nice books, Prarthana and Prem Bhakti Chandrika. In the end of Prarthana, his last prayer, he is sort of showing his life of spiritual hankering. It's not that he's saying, I wish to negate my feelings of love. But what is he saying? He's saying, Oh Krishna, when will that day come when I will be standing at the door of my house when you were walking through the village to take the cows for pasturing. And when I see you, I'll become so overwhelmed with emotion that I will remove the pins from my hair, which tie my hair up, and my hair will fall on my shoulders, and I will look at you with eyes full of longing. Such aspirations. You see, what if, Charu, what if we were to aspire for Krishna in that way? Narottam says, he says, when I will go to the kitchen to cook, while cooking I will be singing beautiful songs about you, Krishna. I'll chant your holy names. And by thinking of you, tears will fill my eyes. And then the senior people will come and they'll say, why are you crying? And I will look at them and I will say, oh, there's too much smoke in the kitchen. Or he says, Krishna, if you were a flower, I would wear you in my hair. Did you ever think of Krishna in that way? If you were a flower, I'd just put you in my hair. Or, you know, like sometimes when you go to India, if you look at like Vrindavan, you see the old widow ladies in the bazaar, and they're buying a little rice or a little oil or something like that, and then when it comes time to pay, you'll see they'll take the ends of their saris. You ever seen that before? And they have the end of their sari tied in a knot, and they have their money in there, right? And Narottam says, if you were a jewel, I would have tied you on the end of my cloth, and I would take you with me everywhere. You see, so instead of negating fine feelings of affection, this is how the great devotees feel. Narottam Das Thakur says, Shamsundar, if I were Chandan, I would have been smeared all over your body. And then when you engaged in your sporting pastimes, and your perspiration would have come, then all of that chandan would have been washed down your body and it would have landed on your lotus feet. That would be my perfection. Charu, you thinking that way? And then Narottam Das Thakur says, he says, what desires and aspirations I am. How shameless I am. He said, I am just like a dwarf who's trying to reach up and catch the moon. But this is an expression of my feelings of love for you. You see? So Kunti Devi, she's saying, please, let my expression of love be exclusively for you. I have affection for my family, I have affection for my sons, I have affection for the Vrishnis, but this is all on the basis of my bodily connection. This is on the basis of skin alone. Srila Prabhupada here, he says, skin affection, skin attraction is like a disease. Or it's like Srila Sanatana has said, Yehi sansparsaja bhoga dukiyona evate. Sparsajam. Sparsajam means the contact, the rubbing of flesh, the rubbing of skin. Dukkha yonaya evate is only a source of suffering. Kunti Devi is showing us, in the highest sense, that our attraction to the family, our attraction to our community, our attraction to so many material things really is only a source of suffering for us. And therefore we should aspire in the same way as Srimati Kunti Devi. Let my attraction only be for you. Let my attraction for you be Ekeha Kurunandana. Let me have Ekanta Bhakti. Ekanta Bhakti means just single-pointed Bhakti. We see great devotees have that type of Ekanta Bhakti. It's just like there's the example in the Brihad Bhagavatamritam in the first part of the Brihad Bhagavatamritam, when Narada Muni is trying to find out what is the first part? The greatest devotee of the Lord. He's searching, looking for the greatest devotees, and he's going here and there, and he's meeting everyone, and then he meets Hanumanji. And he says, Hanuman, I've been told that you're the greatest devotee of the Lord. And Hanuman goes, Ram, 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 Ram. I'm not a devotee of the Lord. Who gave you this misinformation? I'm not a devotee. And so they have some discussion. And then Narada says, but Hanumanji, quickly, let us go to Dwarka, because I have heard that your Sri Ram has again appeared in this world as Dwarkadish, and he's living in Dwarka, and you can go to Dwarka and you can see Sri Ram. And Hanuman goes, yes, let's go immediately. My Ram is there in Dwarka. Let us go and see him. And then he's just getting ready to go. And he's saying, well, what form will he show me? Will he show me the form of Dwarkadish, or will he show me only the form of Ram? He said, because my mind is fixed. I do not wish to see anything other than the form of Sri Ram. You see, you could have even gone to Dwarka, and you could have seen Krishna, you could have seen Vasudeva. But he said, no, I have Ekanta Bhakti. I only wish to see Sri Ram. But we have an experience of, we've heard of when Krishna, when they were having that dancing in Vrindavan in the evening, and Krishna at one point, started to, be naughty in the way that he is, and he started to play around some. He decided to leave the dancing, correct? So he disappeared. And then there's stories that the young ladies, they went running through the Vrindavan forest at night. I think this is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And the young ladies were running, and Krishna saw that they were coming. So what did Krishna do? Krishna assumed the form of Narayan. So all of a sudden Krishna changes himself, and he's in the forest of Vrindavan, and he's showing 4 arms as Lord Narayan. And the gopis, they come running, and they say, oh look, there's Lord Narayan. And they go, Namo Narayan, Namo Narayan. Have you seen Krishna? Have you seen the son of Nanda Maharaj? Which way is he gone? You see. And he goes, oh, he went that direction. And then Srimati Radharani, she comes running, and she sees Narayan. And she goes up before Narayan, and Narayan is standing there. But her spirit of devotion and love for Krishna is so powerfully strong that what happens to Narayan is like Krishna standing there trying to show his Narayan Swarup, and 2 arms keep disappearing, and the crown keeps going, and a peacock feather keeps going, coming. And Radharani says, I know who you are. You're trying to show that you're somebody, but you're somebody else. Ekanta Bhakti. Ekeha Gurunandana. So we should aspire. And how will we come to that position? How will we actually come to that position? That unalloyed devotion. What's that verse in the last chapter? He says, Bhakti amam abhijanati avanyas jasmi tattaha Vito mam tattato gyatva vishapeta anantanam. He says, I can only be understood by pure and unalloyed devotion. That's the only way I can be understood. When you have that pure and unalloyed devotional service, I become revealed. But what does Sukha Goswami, what does he say? The sages of Naimisharanya, they say, what is the greatest thing that everybody in human society should do? And what is the activity which is going to give people the greatest level of happiness? And he answers their question. He says, Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir oksajane ahai tuki apratiyata yayatma suprasidati. He says, Savai pumsam. Pumsam means human society. The greatest dharma, or the greatest activity for everyone in human society, he says, paro dharmo, the supreme dharma. Yato bhaktir oksajane. He says, you have to love and oksajane. You have to love Krishna. And then he gives the indication, how will we get ourselves into that realm of like pure love? He says, ahai tuki apratiyata. He says, ahai tu. He says, without any motivation you have to love. You have to serve without expecting return. Apratiyata. You have to do it all the time. And he says, Yenatma suprasidati. That will thrill your soul more than anything else. So that's like the constant flow of the Ganga without any obstruction. And how will we do that? We'll do that by following Srila Prabhupada's instructions. We should learn how to chant Hare Krishna free from offense. Srila Prabhupada said, please chant your prescribed number of rounds per day. Srila Prabhupada said, please strictly follow regulative principles. Srila Prabhupada said, please study my books. One time back in 1976, I had a ladies, I was living in Toronto, Canada at that time, and and because I was a married man, I had a ladies' Sankirtan party. And these ladies were really, really good book distributors. Wow, they were so good. They could distribute 100 Bhagavad Gitas a day, and I mean, they were good, sometimes more. And we went to the Summer Olympics in Montreal, Canada in 1976. And then we finished up the Olympics on Saturday night. We just jumped in the car and we drove directly to New York City, because on Sunday was the first big Rath Yatra in New York City, and Srila Prabhupada was there. So we drove to New York, and we saw Prabhupada. We just reached the temple in time in the morning when Srila Prabhupada was seeing the deities at Darshan. And then Srila Prabhupada went up to his room, and Rameshwar Prabhu read from Chaitanya Charitamrita about Rath Yatra, and then we all went down to the Rath Yatra site. And it was huge. It was really big. And then somewhere during the parade, Srila Prabhupada came down, and he got on, I think, Balaram's cart, and he rode on Balaram's cart. And then we went to the park. Maybe it was Washington Square Park or Tompkins, I think Washington Square Park. And Srila Prabhupada gave an address over there. And then we went back to the temple. When I got back to the temple, I got into the elevator, and Prabhupada's secretary was right there. So I reached in my pocket, and I pulled out a Vyasa Puja offering that I had written, that I wanted to give to Prabhupada while I was there in New York. And I said, well, his secretary is here. I said, this is the choice person to give it to him. So I gave it to the secretary, and just in front of me, the secretary opened the envelope, pulled out my offering, scanned it. He was a sannyasi. He was a mean guy. And he said, hey, Grihasta, nice verses you used, nice ideas. Then he folded the letter up, stuffed it back in the envelope, gave it back to me. He said, but Prabhupada doesn't have time for this because Prabhupada just wants to translate, so take your letter back. And when he said like that, you know, a 4-letter word came in my mind. And it probably is not the 4-letter word that you're thinking of. The 4-letter word that came in my mind was K-I-L-L. That was my response, you know. I was just thinking, let me kill this guy quite fast. Then I decided that that wouldn't be dharmic to kill my spiritual secretary. So I just took the letter back and I decided it would be, you know, don't make offenses to sannyasis, and it's better for me to be humble and so I took it back and I went back to Toronto, and then one Indian gentleman from our congregation was just going to Vrindavan and Prabhupada was going to be there, so I requested that he would give it to Prabhupada, which he did. He said he walked in on Prabhupada's evening darshan. Prabhupada would give a darshan in Vrindavan like from 4 till 6 or something like that every day. People could come and meet him. And when he walked in, he gave the letter to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada looked at it, and he gave it to his secretary. He said, please read this letter to the people who are sitting here. And so my offering got read to Prabhupada in that way. And then I received a letter from Prabhupada. I got a letter back. And Prabhupada said, my dear Ayodhyapati, he said, thank you very much for your letter. I think he said undated letter. He said the contents of your letter are correct to the Siddhanta. Basically, I began my letter by saying that I was a very unfortunate and fallen person. I'd taken birth in a real bad family. And it was just by Prabhupada's grace that anything had become of my life. And Prabhupada, he said, your Siddhanta is correct. He said, your letter is correct to the Siddhanta. And then he wrote, he said, I can tell from your letter that you've been reading my books. He said, therefore, and then he quoted a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Prabhupada said, therefore, he said, please always study my books. He said, if you will always study my books, he said, you will never be affected by any type of illusion, you know. And he said, and he concluded, he said, I thank you very much. So we should chant the prescribed rounds that Srila Prabhupada has requested us to chant. We should try to chant attentively. We should try to chant free from offense. We should strictly follow principles. We should study Srila Prabhupada's literatures very, very carefully. We should serve the feet of all Vaishnavas. And we should participate in the preaching mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Srila Prabhupada always said, if you do these things, very quickly you advance in devotional service. And it will come to that point where our flow of devotion and our flow of love for Krishna will be just like the unobstructed Ganga. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments?
Maharaj, are the Pandavas eternally liberated souls?
I should think so. For the Lord's eternal associates. Yes, sir.
Maharaj, sometimes we have to follow instructions like without, when an instruction comes from a spiritual authority, we should follow it without deliberation. And I was wondering how where does the Guru Sadhu Shastra kind of a checkout comes into that kind of way of following blindly. When Prabhupada said that we should follow blind our spiritual master or our spiritual authority, how does it
Well, we generally try to have people in our society as authorities who are spiritually competent and intact. And thus, every time you receive an instruction, it's not required that you doubt the instruction. But there's always the perspective for doubt. There's always the perspective for question. I think that's evident from Vedic literatures, isn't it? How many times is Arjuna asking questions? Arjuna is saying, I don't want to do it. I don't want to fight. And my family, I don't want to do it. And Krishna is going, okay. And then Krishna starts to talk to him. And then Arjuna, different times, he raises doubts. He calls Krishna, he says, "Oh Madhusudan, destroyer of my doubts." So doubts can be there, and how will doubts be eliminated unless we raise questions? And then Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, "Tadvidi pranipadena pariprashnena sevaya." What does prashna mean?
Inquire.
Means questions. Prashna is question. Yeah. So questioning can be there. You see, questioning is part of the process. Srimad Bhagavatam, it's all questions being put forward. It's all answers being placed. And then, you hear the answers and you go, is that what is said in Gita? Is that what is said in Bhagavatam? Is that what is said in other sadhus? Is this what Guru is saying? So that way there can be the process of checks and balances. And then if there's ever any, doubt, it can be raised to authorities. It's not that we're dictators, Any other questions? Questioning and discussion. That is a very healthy process. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask about
Pardon?
Hanumanji. Who is Hanuman? Because I heard Atmatatva Prabhu said that Lord Shiva wanted to help Lord Ram in the battle, and that's why Hanuman became his son. But also I heard that Hanuman is like Lord Shiva.
Hanuman is like Lord Shiva. I have heard that Hanuman is the son of Vayu. He's the son of the wind god. And I have heard that Hanuman is the strongest jiva of the material cosmos. And it brings up the question of Hanuman as a Chiranjeev. Has anyone ever heard that Hanuman is a Chiranjeev? I don't think so, But Hanuman is like one of the classic examples of, ekanta bhakti to the Lord or unavoided fixed devotion. As far as Hanuman being Lord Shiva or something like that, I haven't heard that. Although there may be something esoteric that Atmatattva Prabhu maybe.
No. He said that he wanted to help Lord Ram, and that after was the conception with Parvati, but Parvati didn't want him because he was a monkey again, and Lord Shiva asked Devi to take the conception.
Oh,
but was like this cartoons had this like explain like I don't know.
It's some esoteric thing that I don't understand, that I haven't read or I don't understand. Amatattva, he sort of swims in Ram Lila, you know, he's a very expert speaker on Ramayan, but I don't know that. Okay, thank you all very much. Radhikanaga, something?
You Maharaj, you were saying the other day about Lord Chaitanya that he's what we read that Lord Chaitanya gave what no other incarnation is given before Krishna Prem, but Lord Krishna also gave Krishna Prem and Lord Machandra. Is that correct?
Pardon?
Lord Krishna gave Krishna Prem as well. Lord Krishna gave Krishna Prem.
Lord Krishna had stated that he presented an argument with Bhagavad Gita, and in the end of the argument, he basically said, "Surrender to me." He sort of like held the stick, you know, surrender. You know, of course, I mean that's sort of like a graphic sort of perspective that we can see, but he was demanding that you surrender. But Lord Chaitanya was just saying, please, just take love. And Lord Chaitanya was giving love to really the most fallen people. And the love that he was giving was not like the love that you find in Vaikuntha anywhere. And it wasn't like the love that you find in so many different places where the Lord exists. But Lord Chaitanya is specifically giving the love that's felt like the unalloyed spirit of devotional love that's felt by the residents of Goloka Vrindavan. You know, and most specifically, it says Unata Ujjvala Rasa. And that Unata Ujjvala Rasa, the different great acharyas, they have commented, where they say that means the type of love which is felt by the, young girls of Vrindavan for Krishna. So Lord Chaitanya was very, very specific in delivering the highest type of prema through dispersing Harinam Sankirtan. So that Lord Chaitanya, he appeared, and when he came, he had reasons for us and reasons for himself why he appeared. And when he appeared, his sort of agenda for us was that he wanted us to taste that type of love, even though we were disqualified. And his own personal agenda is that he wished to taste that love. So therefore, he accepted like the golden complexion of Shiva.